Rain makes hospital floors honest. It doesn't glide like the movies. It grabs your shoes, it tests your balance, it reminds you how fast control can vanish. At 2:17 a.m. in Rainier Harbor Medical Center, rookie ER nurse Kara Monroe held a metal tray while a surgeon pulled 3 bullets from a dying man's body. The last one hit with a clang that sounded final. Then, 2 men in perfect suits walked into the trauma bay bone dry in a storm-flashed FBI badges and asked her one question that rewired her life. Did he give you the drive? If you've ever trusted a uniform and still felt unsafe, stay to the end. This story isn't just about survival. It's about what you do when the rules stop protecting you. Like the video and comment where you're watching from because the next 60 seconds change everything. The words hung in Kara Monroe's head the way a monitor tone hangs after it stops the echo you cannot unhear. She stood there in the wash of fluorescent light and storm noise, feeling the room narrow down to a badge, a tray, and her own breathing. But before anyone stepped into that trauma bay in a perfect suit, before the air turned sharp with threat, the night had looked ordinary. Tacoma was soaked to the bone. Rain slid down the glass doors of Rainier Harbor Medical Center in thick ropes, and the wind coming off Puget Sound pushed the cold straight through your scrubs. The emergency entrance smelled like wet pavement disinfectant, and that faint metallic scent that lived in every hospital no matter how hard the floors were scrubbed. Outside, the port cranes were dark silhouettes against the low clouds. Inside the building stayed bright and awake even when the rest of the city slept. Kara checked her pockets the way some people checked their pulse. Pen, tape, alcohol wipes, trauma shears. A folded note card with a drug conversion she still did not trust herself to remember when the adrenaline hit. She had been a nurse for 6 months, which meant she still marked time in months. The veteran staff marked time in bodies and shifts in seasons of flu and heat waves and holidays that came with drunk drivers. At the nurses' station, the computers threw pale light onto tired faces. Triage boards glowed with room numbers and complaint codes. The beep of a pulse ox drifted down the hallway like a metronome, steady and indifferent. Tessa Vaughn leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, shoulders loose, the way they got after years of learning which alarms mattered and which ones were just noise. She had a sharp mouth and an even sharper read on people. Kara had watched her calm down a screaming patient with 3 sentences and a look that said, "I have seen worse than you." Tessa's eyes flicked to Kara's hands. "You're doing inventory again." Kara paused. "It helps. It does nothing," Tessa said, then let her gaze soften for half a second. "But you keep moving when you're anxious, so keep doing it." Kara tried to laugh like she was not anxious. She did not quite pull it off. At the front desk, Eli Brooks sat behind a plexiglass barrier with a headset crooked over one ear. He typed as if the keyboard might bite. Eli was the kind of person patients trusted because he looked like he was trying. He was also the kind of person the night shift protected because the ER could eat gentle people if nobody watched. Eli glanced up at Kara. "Room 6 wants water again." "Which one is room 6? Kara asked, though she already knew. Eli sighed. "Sprained ankle. He says he has been waiting forever." Kara lifted her brows. "Forever in emergency medicine is 20 minutes. Eli gave her a look. "Please do not say emergency medicine things at me. I still work here." Kara grabbed a cup, filled it at the dispenser, and walked down the hall. The emergency department at night felt like the inside of a machine. The lights were constant. The air was cool. Wheels squeaked on tile. Every door had a different kind of silence behind it. Some rooms held pain that people tried to hide. Some held fear that people could not. Room 6's patient was a man in his 30s with an ankle wrapped in elastic and a scowl that looked practiced. He stared at her badge when she entered. "You knew." Kara set the water down. "I am." He snorted. "Great." Kara met his eyes. "If you wanted someone with 20 years of experience, you should not have tried to walk down wet stairs in flip-flops." The man blinked, then a reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. Fair. Kara checked the wrap, made sure his toes were warm, reminded him about ice and elevation, and left before the conversation could slide into complaining again. She learned quickly that the ER was full of people who felt powerless and tried to get their power back in the only ways they knew. Sometimes that meant shouting. Sometimes it meant bargaining. Sometimes it meant picking a fight with the nearest person in scrubs. Back at the station, Dr. Simon Reddick walked by with a chart in his hand and his reading glasses riding low on his nose. He was not tall, but he filled a hallway the way a storm filled the sky. His voice made people listen. His hands moved like they had done this work so long the motions had become part of his bones. Reddick glanced at Kara. "How's our ankle athlete?" "Still alive," Kara said. Reddick made a sound that might have been approval. "Good. Anything else brewing?" Kara hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet." Reddick pointed with his pen. "Do not say quiet." Kara looked at him. "You believe in that?" Reddick's mouth twitched. "I believe in consequences." Tessa from triage called out without looking up. He said it. Reddick turned his head. I did not. Kara felt the familiar warmth of their banter. The first time she worked with this crew, she thought the jokes meant they did not care. Then she watched Tessa sit with an elderly man who had no family and hold his hand until he fell asleep. She watched Reddick buy dinner for a paramedic who had just worked a fatal pediatric call. She watched Eli slip extra crackers to a teenager who had not eaten all day. Humor, Kara realized, was their armor. Under it, most of them were still soft in the places that mattered. The waiting room was thinner now, but not empty. A mother bounced a toddler with a wet cough on her hip, whispering reassurances that sounded more like prayers. A man in work boots stared at a blood-soaked rag wrapped around his hand, refusing to look at the wound. A young woman with mascara smudged under her eyes stared at the wall as if the wall could answer questions she could not say out loud. Kara tried to chart, but her eyes kept lifting to the toddler. The little chest rose faster than it should. The mother's face had that tense, controlled expression Kara had learned to recognize. It was the expression of someone who was trying not to panic in public. Kara walked over, careful not to startle them. "Hey," she said softly. "How's he doing?" The mother's eyes flicked to Kara's badge, then to Kara's face. "He's been like this all week. My dad says it's a cold, but he sounds worse tonight." Kara crouched to the child's level. "Can I listen?" The mother nodded, relief flashing across her face like a light turning on. Kara listened with her stethoscope, focusing on the sound of air moving through small lungs. The breaths were rough, tight at the end. Not an immediate crisis, but not something to ignore. "I'm going to get you back soon," Kara said. "Okay." The mother's shoulders dropped as if she had been holding them near her ears for hours. "Thank you." Kara returned to triage and caught Tessa's eye. Tessa did not pretend she had not noticed. "Room 9 clears in a few. I'll put them next." Kara nodded grateful. 10 minutes later, Kara saw the board update and Tessa waved the mother and toddler through the doors. The mother moved fast, clutching the child like she could hold him together by force. Kara met them halfway and guided them into the room, the toddler's small hand gripping a stuffed animal that looked like it had been washed 100 times. Inside, the room light made the child's skin look paler than it had in the waiting area. Kara checked his temperature, listened again, and watched his ribs pull with each breath. The mother kept apologizing as if being worried was a crime. "You did the right thing coming in," Kara said, keeping her voice low. She showed the mother how to sit the toddler upright, how to count breaths, how to spot when the effort turned from uncomfortable to dangerous. It was not dramatic medicine. It was the kind of care that mattered because it made someone feel less alone. When Kara stepped out, she caught Tessa watching her with a look that was almost approval. "Don't get cocky," Tessa said. Kara managed a small smile. "I won't." Tessa's gaze shifted toward the ambulance bay. "You work in a port city. Nights go from quiet to chaos in a heartbeat. Keep your head on a swivel." Kara nodded. The words were not a warning so much as a fact delivered like weather. Time blurred in small tasks. Kara started an IV on an older woman who had been vomiting for 2 days and could barely keep her eyes open. She helped a teenager calm down after a panic attack, guiding him through breaths until his hand stopped shaking. She checked on the man with the bandaged hand and convinced him to let her unwrap it long enough to irrigate the cut. A little before 1, a man from the shipyard came in with a gash across his scalp, rainwater dripping off his hard hat and down his neck. He tried to act like it was nothing, but blood kept sliding into his eyebrow. "I'm fine," he insisted, as Kara guided him into an exam room. Tessa called from triage, "If you were fine, you would not be bleeding on my chairs." The man gave a sheepish laugh. Deck plate was slick. Kara cleaned the cut and checked his pupils. Dock workers, welders, machinists. Tacoma was full of men who moved heavy objects for a living and treated their own pain like an inconvenience. Dr. Reddick came in to stitch. He nodded once at Kara's setup. Clean. Kara felt the single word hit like a small reward. As Reddick worked, the shipyard man stared at the ceiling and said, "Feels like the city's getting meaner." Reddick tied off the suture with quick efficiency. "The city's the city. Take care of yourself." When the man left with a fresh bandage, he paused at the door. "Thanks," he said, quieter than before. Kara nodded. "Be careful out there." Later, a sailor arrived with a burn on his forearm, the kind you got from grabbing metal that had no business being that hot. He tried to joke through the sting. "You should not test metal with your skin," Kara said, as she wrapped cool gauze around the burn. He grinned. "I was trying to impress my chief." Kara raised an eyebrow. "Did it work?" He sighed. "No. He told me I'm an idiot." Kara's mouth twitched. He might be right. The sailor laughed and immediately hissed, then steadied himself as Kara wrote instructions in clear block letters and made him repeat them back. Before he left, he glanced at her badge and said, "You're good at this." Kara watched him go and let herself hold the words for 1 second before the next call light blinked. Between patients, she kept reading labels twice, sometimes 3 times. She asked questions even when she worried they sounded stupid. She preferred embarrassment to regret. In the med room, she restocked syringes and saline flushes, hands steady breathing, slow. The hum of the refrigerator and the click of cabinet latches were oddly calming. For a moment, the ER felt like it had edges again, like it was a place with walls instead of a tide that could pull you under. Around 2, the department settled into a lull. The waiting room thinned. The hallways quieted. Even the overhead paging went silent for long stretches. Eli fought the printer again, pulling out a jammed form with a sigh. "Why does it hate me?" Tessa did not look up from her board. "It hates all of us. You are not special." Eli held the paper up like evidence. "This is personal." Kara smirked. "Nothing is personal after midnight." Eli glanced toward the windows where rain blurred the world into gray. "The storm feels personal." Kara's body ached in a familiar way, a deep fatigue that sat behind her eyes. She had learned to read her own exhaustion like a set of vital signs. If her hands started to shake, she drank water. If her thoughts slowed, she walked a lap around the station. If her stomach tightened, she breathed through it. This job punished small mistakes. It punished hesitation. Nursing school taught procedures. The ER taught survival. Tessa leaned on the counter near Kara and stretched her neck. "Why ER?" she asked, casual. Kara looked at her. "Because I'm a masochist." Tessa waited unimpressed. Kara exhaled. "My mom was a nurse. Not here. A small clinic. People used to show up after hours with cuts, fevers, things they did not want to wait on. She would open the door anyway. She would do what she could. I used to sit in the back room and listen to the voices the way people sounded when they were scared." Tessa's eyes stayed on Kara. No joke this time. Kara continued quieter. "When she died, I kept thinking about those knocks. I wanted to be the door that opened." Tessa's mouth tightened, not unkindly. "That will break your heart." Kara shrugged, pretending she was braver than she felt. "Maybe, but it makes sense to me." Reddick passed by again, glancing at a monitor readout on his phone. You two having feelings on my shift. Tessa lifted her coffee. Never. Reddick made a sound and kept walking. Eli raised a hand from the desk. Please do not talk about death at 2 in the morning. I am already stressed. Kara looked at him. Then do not say the Q word. Eli held up both hands. I won't, I promise. The radio stayed quiet for a moment, almost polite. Then it crackled. The sound cut through the lull like a sudden cold draft. Dispatch came through with static and urgency. Rainier Harbor inbound trauma. ETA 2 minutes. Male mid-30s. Multiple gunshot wounds. Blood pressure dropping. Unresponsive. Kara stood so fast her chair rolled back. The fatigue vanished, replaced by a sharp focus that felt like stepping into bright light. Tessa's face changed. Humor went away. Her eyes narrowed and she became all business. Reddick appeared at the station already pulling gloves from his pocket. Which bay? Trauma. 3. Kara said, already moving. She pushed through thin doors and flicked on the brighter lights. The room looked suddenly too clean, too ready. She checked suction, she checked oxygen, she pulled airway equipment. She hung saline and set 2 units of O-negative blood within reach. Her hands moved with practiced speed, but her mind still had room for the thought she never said out loud. Gunshots meant someone had brought violence here. Violence did not follow rules. Tessa popped her head in. They're close. Kara nodded, snapping on fresh gloves. The snap sounded loud in the empty bay. The automatic doors at the ambulance entrance hissed open. Wind and rain slammed into the corridor. Then came the scream of gurney wheels fast and hard. 2 paramedics barreled in soaked to the skin. The gurney between them shook with speed. On it lay a man built like he belonged on a recruitment poster, not in an emergency room. Even half unconscious, even drenched in blood, his body held a stubborn tension, as if it refused to accept the idea of dying. The lead medic shouted breathless, found him near the docks. No ID, no wallet, 3 holes, pressure's crashing. Reddick's voice cut through the chaos. On my count, 1, 2, 3. They transferred the man to the bed. Kara caught his forearm to steady him, and the hardness under her fingers surprised her dense muscle even beneath cold skin. Not a street kid. Not a fragile body broken by the city. Reddick's eyes moved over the wounds with quick precision. Cut the clothes he ordered. Kara lifted the trauma shears, leaned in, and set the blades against thick, rain-soaked fabric. Kara set the blades of the trauma shears against the man's jacket and squeezed. The fabric resisted in a way denim never did. Thick. Woven tight. It tore with a clean, ugly rip that sounded too loud in the bright room. Reddick leaned in, eyes narrowed. That is not civilian gear. Tessa stepped closer, gloves already on her face, gone sharp and flat. Where did you say he was found? Near the docks, the medic repeated. By the container yard. Like somebody dropped him and ran. Kara cut up the sleeve. Under the jacket was a black shirt soaked through, clinging to the man's chest. She snipped it away, and the room fell into a brief hush. 3 wounds. Not the scattered chaos she'd seen on Saturday nights after bar fights. Not the shredded mess of a close-range blast. These were small, precise, and tightly grouped. Reddick's mouth tightened. 2 high, 1 low left. The medic nodded, still panting. Yeah, 3 shots. Reddick did not look at the medic when he answered. He looked at the spacing. That is training. Kara swallowed. She forced herself to do what her hands knew. Pressure pads, gauze, direct pressure. She pressed hard and watched blood seep anyway, stubborn and dark. Vitals, Reddick snapped. 1, medic read off numbers. Pressure 80/50 and falling. Pulse 140. He was unresponsive when we found him. He groaned once in the rig. Kara slipped a cuff on and watched the monitor swing down again as if it was trying to flee the reality. Her mouth went dry. Reddick pointed at her without looking away from the wounds. 2 large bore lines now. Kara moved to the man's arm. searching for a vein in skin turned pale and clammy. She was aware of his size, the weight of him, the muscle packed into his shoulder and forearm. She found a vein, slid the needle in, taped it down with quick practiced hands. As she pressed the tape, her gaze snagged on the inside of his wrist. Numbers. Not a tattoo, not a bracelet imprint. Written in thick black marker like someone had scrawled it in a hurry. Kara leaned closer, squinting through her face shield, 449XC. She looked up at Tessa. "Do you see that?" Tessa's eyes flicked down, then back up to Kara's face. "I see it." Reddick's voice cut through them. Blood. Tessa was already moving. Massive transfusion protocol, she called toward the hallway. Kara spiked the first bag of saline and then the blood. She watched the dark red line fill and the drip chamber pulse with each drop. The man's chest rose and fell shallowly. Reddick pressed his fingers around the upper wound, then the second. He glanced at Kara's tray of instruments. Suction ready, scalpels. Kara handed them over. He worked fast, eyes and hands in sync. The room filled with movement, with purpose, with the sound of gloves snapping and metal clinking against metal and the monitor arguing with them in beeps. Tessa leaned near the patient's shoulder, wiping away mud and blood with a gauze pad, clearing the skin. Kara saw it at the same moment she did. A tattoo on the upper arm, half hidden under grime, but unmistakable, even blurred. A trident. Kara felt the air in her lungs catch. Tessa said the words like she was trying not to. "That's a sealed trident." The medic's eyes widened. No kidding. Reddick's expression did not change, but his jaw hardened. "He is a patient. We treat him like anyone else." Kara wanted to believe that would be the end of it. That the walls of a hospital could hold off whatever the world was outside. That the rules mattered. She watched the man's blood pressure dip again, and the belief did not hold. Reddick's tone snapped into urgency. "He is not making it upstairs. We are opening him here." Kara's stomach dropped. "Here." Reddick did not glance up. "Here." Tessa's eyes flashed to Kara. This was the moment that made rookies. This was the moment that broke them. Kara heard her own voice come out steadier than she felt. "Suction is ready." Reddick nodded once, permission and command in the same motion. Tessa prepped the kit. "Kara, keep the fluids moving. Do not let him slip." Kara turned the clamp, checked the bag, watched the blood stream into the man's body as if trying to replace what was pouring out. The first incision changed everything. The air got heavier, sharper. The smell turned from clean antiseptic to something that lived closer to iron and heat. The sound of suction became a constant roar as Kara moved to keep the field clear. Reddick worked with the grim calm of someone who had done this too many times to hesitate. He talked in clipped phrases. "Retractor." Kara placed it in his hand. "Clamp." She passed it. More suction. She adjusted the tip, careful not to touch anything she should not. The man's chest moved under the pressure of hands and instruments. His skin looked too pale against the red stain spreading across the sheets. Kara's mind tried to pull away from the reality, but her training held her. Focus on tasks. Focus on vitals. Focus on the next thing. The monitor wailed and then steadied. The rhythm was thin like a thread you could snap with one wrong move. Reddick's voice was low, aimed at himself more than anyone else. "Come on." Kara saw his hands disappear deeper, searching. Then he grunted. He withdrew forceps and held up a deformed slug slick with blood. He dropped it into the metal kidney tray Kara held out. Clink. The sound went through her. Reddick did not pause. He shifted, found another. Clink. 2 bullets sat in the tray like blunt teeth. Kara's eyes were drawn to them against her will. They looked wrong. Longer than the rounds she had seen in gunshot cases. Heavier. The tips had a pale, strange sheen beneath the lights. Reddick's face tightened. Third. He leaned in deeper. The monitor spiked. Kara's voice cut out before she could stop it. His heart rate. Tessa stepped in, eyes on the numbers. 160. Dropping. Reddick's shoulders tensed. Hold him. Kara's hands moved to the suction again, clearing the blood, giving Reddick visibility. She could feel sweat gathering along her hairline under her cap. The third bullet did not want to come out. Reddick's breathing was slow-measured. His hands were steady, but his forearm muscles tightened under the strain. Kara found herself leaning closer, not touching, just willing it to happen. The man's face was partly visible now. Strong jaw, dark stubble, a scar cutting through one eyebrow like a notch. Even unconscious, he looked like someone who had survived things that killed other people. Kara whispered without meaning to, "Stay with us." Reddick made a sound like a growl and pulled. There was a moment of resistance, then release. He lifted the third round free and dropped it into the tray. Clang. It landed heavier than the others. For a second, Kara could only stare at the pool of blood around the 3 bullets. The monitor steadied into a fragile rhythm. Reddick stepped back and stripped off his gloves, hands moving with economy. Pack. Close. Stabilize. Tessa was already cleaning the edges, hands quick. Kara did what she was told, watching the blood pressure crawl upward like a person trying to stand. Reddick looked at the man's shoulder again, the trident tattoo now clearer. "We notify the base," he said. Then he corrected himself. "We notify the proper channels, and we document everything." He glanced at Kara, and his eyes were sharp, assessing. "You holding up?" Kara swallowed, yes. He did not soften. "Good, clean him up, chart every step. Those rounds stay in a sealed tray until pathology logs them." Kara nodded. "Yes, doctor." Reddick turned to Tessa. "Keep the hall clear. Nobody comes in here unless they belong in here." Tessa's jaw tightened, already on it. As the room emptied and the noise of the procedure faded, Kara became aware of how loud the storm still was. Rain hammered the roof. Wind pushed against glass. Somewhere down the corridor a call light chimed and then stopped. She stood alone now with the unconscious man and the steady beep of the monitor. Her hands were sticky with dried blood. Her shoulders ached from tension she had not noticed until it released. She began to clean. Warm water. Soap, gauze pads. She wiped the man's chest, his arms, the mud clinging to his skin. The blood came off in streaks that made the pale skin beneath look even more unreal. Kara leaned close to the inside of his wrist again. 449XC. She scrubbed gently. The ink did not budge. Industrial marker, she thought. The kind that survived oil and sweat and salt air. A code, a label, a message. Her mouth went dry again. She glanced toward the door, half expecting someone to be watching. The man's face was still. His breathing was shallow but steady. His eyelashes were wet with rain that had followed him in. Kara kept cleaning, working her way toward his waist. She started to loosen what remained of his tactical pants, careful and professional, searching for anything that could be contaminated or anything that might interfere with care. A small seam inside the waistband caught her attention. Not a pocket in the normal sense. Stitched into the fabric flat, meant to disappear unless you knew it was there. Kara hesitated. Patient belongings were supposed to be bagged and tagged. But nothing about this man felt normal. Nothing about the night felt normal. She slipped gloved fingers into the seam and felt something rigid. Before she could pull it out, the man's hand shot up. His fingers clamped around her wrist with a strength that made pain flare. Kara gasped and stumbled back, heart slamming against her ribs. His eyes opened. Not hazy, not confused. Sharp blue and wild with panic. He tried to sit up. Pain slammed him back down, stealing his breath. He coughed, wet and rough, and still did not let go of her wrist. Kara forced her voice calm. The voice she had practiced in school and in mirrors, the voice that did not tremble even when her body wanted to. "Easy, you're in the hospital, you're safe." His grip tightened. He pulled her closer, eyes locked on hers like he could anchor himself there. His voice came out torn and low. "Not safe." Kara swallowed. "Sir, you were shot. You need to stay still." He shook his head, once a tiny motion. "Badges." Kara blinked. Badges. His eyes flicked toward the door, then back. They lie. Kara tried to ease her wrist free without jerking. "Who are you?" His lips moved, but only a rasp came out. "Cole." Kara leaned closer. "Cole what?" He swallowed and winced. "Mercer." The name hit Kara like a weight. It sounded like a name that belonged on a uniform. He tugged her wrist toward his waistband, forcing her to look. "Take it," he rasped. Kara looked down. The seam pocket. She hesitated. "What is it?" His eyes burned. "Drive." Kara's throat tightened. A drive. He fumbled weakly fingers, searching the pocket as if he could not trust her to do it. "Hide it. Do not give it." Kara's mind raced. Patient belongings. Evidence, chain of custody, rules, rules, rules. The fear in his eyes did not care about rules. "Who?" Kara whispered. "Who do I not give it to?" His eyes went distant for a second, like he was looking through her at something approaching. "Manticore," he breathed. Kara's stomach knotted. "What is Manticore?" His hand trembled. "They are coming." Kara tried to keep him present. "Who is coming?" "Police." He shook his head, a grim refusal. "Not police." His grip loosened for half a second. He coughed again, pain folding him in. Kara slid her fingers into the seam and pulled the object free. A small black drive, thicker than a normal USB matte casing, edges clean. On one side, etched in silver, a tiny creature with wings and a curling tail. A manticore. Kara stared at it, confused by how ordinary it looked and how dangerous it felt in her hand. Mercer's eyes locked on it. "Hide it," he repeated, voice barely there. Then his hand went limp. His eyes rolled back and he fell unconscious again, head slumping against the pillow. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. He had not coded. He was stable. Kara stood very still. The drive was warm from his body heat. It sat in her palm like a secret that could not be put back. Her training spoke up first. "Bag it, document. Inform the charge nurse, call security." Her instincts spoke louder. "Hide it." She looked at the bullet tray on the cart beside her. 3 strange rounds sitting in blood. She looked at Mercer's face, the scar, the hard lines softened by unconsciousness. She thought of his eyes when he said badges lie. Kara slipped the drive into her scrub pocket. The fabric tugged with the weight small but undeniable. It felt like it was burning a hole through her. She exhaled slowly and turned toward the sink, trying to move like nothing had changed. Then the trauma bay doors opened. Not a nurse, not a doctor, not a paramedic. 2 men stepped inside wearing dark suits cut perfectly to their bodies. Their shoes were polished. Their hair was neat. Their faces were calm. They should have looked soaked coming in from the Tacoma storm. They were dry. The taller man's gaze moved through the room with a cold efficiency, taking in equipment exits, corners, like someone walking into a space he planned to control. He did not look at Mercer. He looked at Kara. His voice was smooth, almost polite. "Nurse." Kara felt her heartbeat try to climb into her throat. She forced her shoulders back. "This area is restricted," she said. The man stepped closer. "Step away from the patient." Kara did not move. "Who are you?" she asked. For a split second she imagined a gun coming out. Instead, he produced a leather wallet and flipped it open. A gold badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. I am Agent Calvin Harker," he said. His partner, broader, younger eyes scanning, stayed near the doorway like a guard dog. "Agent Dean Kroll." Kara held her ground, but she could feel the drive in her pocket like a second pulse. Harker's gaze shifted to the metal kidney tray. The 3 bullets. He stared at them with a look that was not curiosity. It was recognition. "Those rounds," Harker said quietly. "Where did you put them?" Harker's gaze never left the tray. Kara kept her fingers locked around the rim knuckles, whitening under latex. The 3 bullets sat in a shallow pool of blood, catching the overhead light with that dull, wrong shine. She could hear the rain hammering the roof and the ventilator's soft hiss behind her, but the room still felt quiet, as if every sound was holding its breath. "They need to be logged," Kara said. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. "Pathology signs off, chain of custody." Harker tilted his head slightly as if he was listening to a child recite rules. "Chain of custody," he repeated. Kroll's eyes flicked over Kara's shoulder to the patient, then to the cart, then to the corners of the room. He did not stop moving his attention. He moved like a man trained to look for threats and exits, not like someone here to secure a crime scene. Harker took 1 step closer. He smelled faintly of expensive cologne and stale tobacco. Nothing about him carried the hospital smell. He looked like he had walked out of a different world and into this one without getting wet. "Those rounds are federal evidence," Harker said. "If you touch them again, you contaminate them. If you move them, you compromise them." Kara felt heat rise up her neck. "They came out of my patient." Harker's eyes stayed calm. "They came out of a threat to national security." Kara swallowed. The drive in her pocket felt heavier than it had a minute ago. She kept her arms still and tried to keep her face neutral. Reddick had said to chart everything. The rules were supposed to protect patients. The rules were supposed to protect staff. Kara clung to that like a handhold. Kroll pulled a clear evidence bag from inside his suit jacket, along with a pair of gloves. He did it too smoothly, too practiced, as if he had been bagging blood-slick objects in places he had no legal right to be for a long time. "Wait," Kara said. "If you take those, you need to sign the transfer. Hospital protocol." Harker's mouth curved in a thin smile. Not friendly, not amused, just a display. "Federal jurisdiction supersedes hospital protocol," he said. "You can document whatever you like, Nurse Monroe. You can type it in all caps. It will not change what happens next." Kroll lifted the bullets into the bag. The plastic crackled. The blood smeared the inside in dark streaks. Kara watched, unable to stop herself. It was not that they were taking evidence. It was how they took it. No pause. No questions. No glance at the patient. No acknowledgement that a human body was still fighting for life 6 feet away. Harker nodded toward the bed. "How long until he wakes up?" Kara stared at him. "He is sedated. He lost a lot of blood." Harker's eyes slid to the monitor. "That does not answer my question." Kara forced her voice steady. "I do not know." Harker studied her for a beat, then turned his head toward Kroll. "Secure the room." Kroll moved to the door and stood there like a sentry. Harker stepped closer to the bed and looked down at Mercer's face for the first time. His expression did not soften. There was no curiosity. No concern. Just assessment. Kara heard herself say, "Dr. Reddick is the attending. If you have questions, you can speak to him." Harker glanced at her badge and then at her face again like he was filing her away. "I am speaking to you." Kara's heart hit a faster rhythm. "Why?" Harker's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you were alone with him." The words landed in her chest and spread cold. Kara kept her hands at her sides. "I cleaned him up." Harker's voice stayed calm. "Did he speak to you?" Kara felt the memory of Mercer's grip on her wrist, the panic in his eyes, the drive burning warm in her palm. Her mind tried to replay it with new meaning. Badges lie. Hide it. She lifted her chin. He was unconscious. Harker's gaze held her. He did not wake. Not for a second. Not even a whisper. Kara met his eyes and kept her face still. Harker took a slow breath through his nose. Then he nodded once, as if he had decided something. Good. Kara did not exhale. She did not feel like she could. Harker turned to Kroll. "Search his gear." Kara blinked. "Search it." Kroll was already moving toward the pile of tactical clothing on the chair, the jacket Kara had cut open, the boots set aside. He began checking pockets with gloved hands, methodical, quick. Kara's pulse climbed. "That is his personal property." Harker did not look at her. "It is evidence." Kroll lifted the jacket, ran his hand along seams checked inside the lining, shook it once like something might fall out. He moved to the pants fingers, probing waistbands. Kara felt her stomach tighten. The seam pocket was empty now. The drive was on her, hidden in fabric, resting against her hip like a second heartbeat. She kept her posture calm and her eyes down. Kroll knelt and checked under the bed. Then he checked the trash, the counter drawers, the supply cart. Harker watched him and Kara watched Harker. His attention was not on Mercer. It was on the room, on Kara's hands, on her pockets, on the way she stood. Kara's mouth went dry. Harker's eyes flicked to the door and she realized he had heard something in the hall. Footsteps. Voices. The normal pulse of an emergency department. He did not like it. He gestured. Clear the hall. Kroll stepped out, spoke to someone Kara could not see. His voice was low. Kara caught a glimpse of a security guard at the far end of the corridor, then the guard turned away, as if redirected. The sensation of the hospital shifting around them made Kara's skin prickle. It was subtle, but she felt it. People were being moved. Paths were being blocked. Space was being claimed. Harker looked at Kara again. You will remain on this floor. Kara's lips parted. I have other patients. Harker's tone did not change. Not anymore. Kara tried to keep the anger off her face. That is not how this works. Harker's eyes held hers. It is now. Kara did not know what to say to a man who spoke like the rules were optional, and had made them optional with sheer confidence. Harker turned away. Chart your procedure. Do not leave the floor. We may have questions. Kara stepped towards the door, forced her feet to move normally, not like she was running, not like she was afraid. As she passed Kroll, she caught the faintest smell of gun oil on him, a scent that did not belong in a suit. Out in the hall, the air felt colder. The nurse's station was quieter than it should have been. The usual chatter of staff was muted. A couple of nurses glanced toward Trauma 3 and then looked away. Kara saw the way their bodies angled, the way they kept their hands close to their pockets. They sensed that something wrong, even if they could not name it. Tessa appeared at the station with a stack of printed labels and a look that said she had already been briefed by someone or had figured it out on her own. What did they do? Tessa asked softly. Kara lowered her voice. They took the bullets. They are searching his gear. Tessa's jaw tightened. FBI does not walk into an ER and lock it down. Kara felt relief at hearing her suspicion out loud. He showed a badge. Tessa's eyes did not soften. Badges can be made. Control cannot. Who is he? He said Agent Harker, Agent Kroll. Tessa glanced toward Trauma 3, then back at Kara. Reddick. He went to document and notify channels. Tessa leaned closer. Where is Eli? Kara looked toward the front desk. Eli was there, but his posture was stiff. One of the suited men, the younger one, stood near him now, too close. Not touching, but invading space. Eli's face looked pale. Kara's fingers brushed her scrub pocket by instinct. The drive's shape pressed against her fingertips through the fabric. Tessa's eyes followed the movement. Kara. Kara forced her hand still. I need to chart. Tessa did not press, but her gaze sharpened as if she had learned something important. Chart fast. Keep your head up. Kara sat at the computer and pulled up the chart. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. She stared at the screen and saw nothing. In the reflection on the monitor, she could see the hallway behind her. She could see the trauma bay door. She could see Harker's silhouette moving inside. She could see Kroll checking under the bed again, then the chair, then the counter drawers, not securing a scene, hunting for an object. Kara's throat tightened. If they searched her, she was done. The thought arrived fully formed and cold. It was not drama. It was logic. If she had something they wanted, they would take it. If she resisted, they would label her. If she complied, they would still have no reason to keep her safe. Kara forced her breathing slow. She typed the basics first. Time of arrival, vitals, interventions, procedure notes. The words looked sterile and small compared to what she had seen. She typed and watched. Kroll lifted Mercer's boots and shook them as if a drive could be hidden inside. Kara's stomach twisted. Mercer had mentioned a transponder in his boot in a desperate whisper. She had not believed it then. She did not know what to believe now. Harker stepped to the edge of the bed and adjusted the sheet with a casual motion like he owned the body under it. Kara's fingers froze on the keyboard. Tessa's voice slid in beside her. You are shaking. Kara realized her hands had begun to tremble. She forced them still and kept typing. Tessa leaned on the counter as if she was just resting, but her gaze tracked the suited men. Reddick is going to lose his mind when he sees this. Kara's eyes stayed on the screen. He already knows they are here. Knowing and seeing are different, Tessa said. Kara swallowed. Her eyes moved to the far wall where a potted plant sat in the waiting area, a dusty fake tree that had survived decades of neglect. She imagined pushing the drive into the soil. She imagined losing it there. She imagined trying to get it back later and finding nothing. The sharps container flashed through her mind and she dismissed it. Too permanent. Too dangerous. The bathroom, ceiling tile. She could hide it there. It would be out of her pocket. Out of reach if she got searched. Kara stood. Tessa's eyes caught her. "Where are you going?" "Bathroom," Kara said. Tessa's mouth tightened, but she nodded once. "Do not take long." Kara walked at a steady pace, clipboard and hand posture squared, pretending she was just another nurse moving through another shift. She passed Trauma 3 and felt Harker's gaze on her back like a hand. Her skin prickled. She did not look at him. She reached the staff restroom, slipped inside and locked the door. The small room smelled of soap and old air. The fluorescent light buzzed softly. Kara stared at herself in the mirror for half a second. Her eyes looked too wide. Her face looked young. Too young to be in this. She reached into her pocket and pulled the drive out. It sat in her palm, matte black, the silver manticore etched into it like a brand. Kara's heartbeat thudded. She looked at the trash. Too obvious. The toilet tank. Too obvious. She looked up. One ceiling tile sat slightly crooked as if it had been lifted and set back down carelessly at some point. Kara climbed onto the toilet seat. Her hands shook as she pushed the tile up. Dust fell onto her gloves. She shoved the drive into the dark space above, pushing it farther than she could easily reach, then slid the tile back into place. She dropped down, flushed the toilet for noise, ran water over her gloved hands, and then took the gloves off, threw them away and smoothed her scrubs like she could smooth the fear out of her body. A pounding hit the door. "Kara," Monroe, a voice said. "Harker." Kara's lungs locked for a beat. She forced air in. Just a second. She took one more breath, opened the door, and stepped out. Harker stood there, filling the hallway too close. His suit looked pressed. His hair looked dry. His eyes looked bored. "You took a while," he said. Kara tried to summon something normal. Nature calls. Harker did not smile. He stepped past her into the restroom without asking. Kara backed out into the hall, pressed against the opposite wall. Harker scanned the bathroom. Trash. Sink cabinet, toilet tank lid. He lifted the trash can lid and looked inside as if he expected to see a drive sitting on top like a confession. Kara kept her face blank. He looked at the ceiling just once, and Kara's pulse jumped hard. His eyes lingered for a beat and then moved on. He stepped out and closed the restroom door behind him. The hallway felt narrower. "We need to ask you one more question," Harker said. He used her first name again. It was not friendly. It was ownership. Kara forced her voice steady. "What is it?" Harker stepped closer until she could smell the coffee on his breath, mixed with something metallic. "The patient," he said quietly. He had a pocket inside his waistband. "It is empty now." Kara's mouth went dry. Harker's eyes did not blink. "Did you find anything on him that was not a weapon?" Kara held his gaze. "No." Harker leaned in and his voice dropped. "Think carefully. Perjury is a felony, and treason has consequences you cannot imagine." Kara felt her spine press harder into the wall. The tile was cold through the fabric. Harker's eyes were inches from hers. "Did he give you the drive?" The question landed like a blade. Kara's mind flashed through outcomes. If she said yes, he would take it. Then what? He would thank her. He would leave. He would erase the problem. She was the problem. If she said no, and he found it, she was finished. Kara looked into his eyes and realized something that chilled her deeper than fear. He did not care about legality. He cared about completion. "Drive, Kara," said softly, buying a fraction of a second. "I did not see a drive." Harker's voice stayed calm. "That is not what I asked." Kara forced the words out. "No." Silence stretched. Harker studied her face like he was reading micro-movements in her pupils. Then his hand lifted slightly, not quite touching her, hovering near her cheek like a threat. Kara's body braced for pain. A voice boomed down the corridor. "What the hell is going on? Dr. Reddick stormed toward them, lab coat flaring behind him with the force of his stride. 2 hospital security guards followed older men with tired eyes and hands resting near their belts. They moved like they had been cops once and still remembered how. Reddick stopped in front of Kara and put himself between her and Harker. That is, my nurse Reddick said each word sharp. "You do not corner my staff. You do not touch my staff." Harker's hand dropped. His posture smoothed as if he had been caught adjusting a tie, not threatening someone. Dr. Reddick Harker said pleasantly, "We were debriefing about patient effects, a matter of national security." Reddick's eyes burned. "I do not care if it is a matter of the end of the world. This is a hospital. We do not interrogate nurses in hallways." He glanced back at Kara. "Are you all right?" Kara nodded once. Her throat tightened when she tried to speak, so she did not. Reddick turned back. "You will conduct any interviews through administration. You will not restrict my staff. You will not block care." Harker's smile did not reach his eyes. "You have no idea what is happening here." Reddick stepped closer. "Then enlighten me, or get out of my department." Harker's eyes stayed on Reddick, but Kara could feel his attention split, tracking the hall, tracking the entire floor like it was a grid. "For your sake," Harker said, "stay in your lane, Doctor." Reddick's voice dropped. "My lane is saving lives. Your lane is not my problem unless you make it my problem." The security guards shifted subtly, bodies angled ready. Harker held the stare for a beat longer, then stepped back, allowing space the way a predator steps back when it knows it can circle later. "Very well," Harker said. "We will be in the bay." Reddick watched him go, jaw clenched. When Harker disappeared into Trauma 3, Reddick turned to Kara and spoke quietly, low enough that only she could hear. "Did he threaten you?" Kara swallowed. "He asked about something." Reddick's eyes sharpened. What something? Kara's mind screamed at her to lie to protect herself, to protect the drive, to protect Mercer. She could not say the word out loud in the hallway. "I will tell you later," Kara whispered. Reddick stared at her for a long beat, then nodded once. "Go to the station. Stay visible. Do not be alone with them." Kara nodded. Reddick's hand touched her shoulder, briefly firm. A grounding. Then he turned away, storming back toward the trauma bay. Kara walked back to the nurse's station on legs that felt unsteady. She sat down and tried to chart again, but the words blurred. Tessa leaned in. "He cornered you." Kara nodded. Tessa's face tightened. "I hate suits." Eli's voice trembled from the desk. "One of them asked for your name." Kara looked up. Eli's eyes were wide, his face pale. "They asked where you went," Eli added. Kara's stomach tightened. "Did you tell them?" Eli swallowed. "I said you were in the bathroom. I did not know I was not supposed to." Kara forced her tone gentle. "It is okay." Eli looked like he might cry. "Are they really FBI?" Tessa's voice was flat. "Maybe, maybe not." Kara stared at the trauma bay door. Inside, Harker and Kroll were still there. They were not leaving. They were building a perimeter, shifting staff, controlling access. Kara's phone buzzed with a notification that did not come through. She looked down. No service. She frowned and tried again. Nothing. She glanced at Tessa. "Do you have signal?" Tessa lifted her phone, frowned, shook it once like that could fix it. "No." Eli whispered, "Mine is dead too." Kara's skin prickled. Hospital signals could be weak in certain corners, but the whole floor, dropping at once, felt wrong. She forced herself to stand. "I need to check the patient." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Kara." "He is my patient," Kara said, and walked. She pushed into Trauma 3. Harker stood near the foot of the bed, now arms loosely at his sides, watching the monitors like he owned them. Kroll was near the counter, checking drawers again, then the linens, then the trash. He looked up when Kara entered, eyes sharp, then returned to searching. Harker's gaze slid to her. "I told you not to leave the floor." "I did not," Kara said. "I am checking vitals." Harker did not argue. He moved half a step to the side, allowing her access as if granting permission. Kara moved to the bed and checked Mercer's IV line. She adjusted the drip. She checked his pupils. Mercer's face looked calmer now, the strain of the brief awakening gone, but Kara knew it was not peace. It was the quiet before a body decided whether it could stay. Kara leaned close and spoke softly, partly to him, partly to herself. "Stay with me." Harker's voice came from behind her. "He said nothing to you." Kara did not turn. He was unconscious. Harker watched her. She could feel it. Kara finished the vitals, kept her movements slow, and stepped back. Harker's eyes flicked to her pockets again. It was a small thing, but Kara saw it. Kara forced her hands to remain visible and empty. She stepped toward the door. Harker spoke again, voice mild. "If he wakes up, you call me immediately." Kara nodded. "Dr. Reddick will be informed." Harker's smile sharpened. "You will call me." Kara left without answering. In the hallway, she took one breath and realized she was dizzy. She walked into the staff restroom again, locked the door, and leaned against the sink. The tile was cold through her scrubs. She stared at the ceiling tile as if she could see through it. The drive was there, hidden, out of her pocket. But now it felt like it was floating above her head, waiting to fall. Kara splashed water on her face, her hands shook. She looked at her reflection and saw a woman trying to look older than she was. A pounding hit the door again. "Kara," Harker's voice said. Kara did not answer immediately. She forced her voice calm. 1 second. She unlocked the door and stepped out. Harker stood there again, too close, too calm. He leaned in slightly. "You are making choices you do not understand." Kara met his eyes. "I am doing my job." Harker's smile did not move his eyes. "Your job is what I allow." Kara's stomach twisted. Harker stepped back just enough to let her pass. "Stay at the station." Kara walked away and her feet felt like they belonged to someone else. At the station, Tessa's eyes stayed on her, reading everything. "What did you do?" Kara's throat tightened. She could not explain without saying the word. Tessa leaned closer, voice low. "Kara." Kara whispered, "He thinks I have something." Tessa's eyes sharpened. "Do you?" Kara hesitated. Tessa's expression changed, as if that hesitation was answer enough. Tessa did not ask again. She just said, "Be smart." Kara nodded once. Then the monitor alarm from Trauma 3 accelerated into a faster rhythm. Kara's head snapped up. She was already moving when she realized what she was doing. She pushed into the bay. Mercer's eyes were open. He was not trying to sit up this time. He looked like he was conserving every ounce of energy, scanning corners, tracking the door, listening. When Kara stepped in, his gaze locked onto her like he recognized the one person in the room who did not feel like an enemy. "You," he rasped. Kara leaned close, checking the IV. "You need to stay still." His voice was a whisper, but it carried weight. "The suits." Kara glanced toward the doorway. Harker and Kroll were not inside at this moment. They were outside, probably repositioning. "They are outside," Kara whispered. "They say FBI." Mercer's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. It was contempt. "Badges are toys." Kara's blood chilled. "You said badges." Mercer coughed wet and rough, then forced air back in. "They are not bureau." Kara's eyes widened. "Then who are they?" Mercer swallowed. Sweat beaded at his temple. "Private contractors. Black work." Kara's fingers tightened around the IV line. "Manticore." Mercer's eyes flashed. "Yes." Kara felt her throat close. "Why are they here?" Mercer's gaze slid to her and he spoke slowly, each word dragging through pain. "Because I have proof." Kara's heart hammered. "Proof of what?" Mercer's eyes held hers. "They sell classified naval intelligence to foreign buyers. The drive is evidence." Kara stared at him, mind trying to reject it. "Contractors, treason, a drive hidden in a hospital ceiling." Mercer's voice dropped. "If they get it, they erase everything." Kara whispered, "Everything." Mercer's eyes flicked toward the hall. "Everyone." Kara's skin prickled. "Why would they kill civilians?" Mercer's breathing was shallow. "Because witnesses complicate cleanup." Kara felt the weight of the statement settle into her bones. She reached into her pocket for her phone again, more out of desperation than logic. No service. Mercer saw the motion and gave a harsh, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Jammed, he rasped, "They own the air." Kara's voice cracked. "I can call local police." Mercer's eyes hardened. "They will not save you." Kara's stomach twisted. "They cannot do this in a hospital." Mercer's gaze stayed steady. "They can." The overhead lights flickered once. Kara froze. They flickered again. Then the main lights cut out. Emergency red lights kicked in, bathing the room in a dim, unnatural glow. The ventilator hummed. The monitors glowed like small moons in the dark. Kara's heart slammed. Mercer whispered, "Power cut." Kara took a step back, listening. From down the corridor, a muffled shout. Then the sharp crackle of a taser. Then a heavy thud. Kara's breath caught. That was security. Mercer's voice was low. "They are moving." Kara's mind raced. "We need to tell Dr. Reddick." Mercer's eyes locked on her. "He is a target." Kara's stomach dropped. She pictured Reddick stepping into the hall, arguing, refusing to move, and a suppressed shot silencing him. She did not want to believe it. A soft sound drifted down the corridor. Not loud, not like a gunshot in a movie. A quiet, flat pop. Then another. Kara knew that sound from training videos and whispers between staff. Suppressors. Someone was shooting in her hospital. Kara's hands trembled. She forced them still. Mercer tried to shift his body. Pain hit him, and he gritted his teeth. "We have to move." Kara stared at him. "You cannot walk." Mercer's eyes were sharp, despite the blood loss. "I walk or I die." Kara's throat tightened. "You have fresh incisions. You will bleed out." Mercer's voice was quiet. "If I stay, they finish me. Then they finish you." Kara's mind flashed to Harker's eyes and the way he had looked at her pockets. Kara whispered, "The drive is hidden." Mercer's face softened for half a second, relief washing through the hard lines. "Good." Then the relief vanished. "Where?" he asked. Kara hesitated, then whispered, "Ceiling tile. Bathroom." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Not safe." Kara's pulse spiked. He checked the bathroom. Mercer's eyes narrowed. "He will check again." Kara swallowed. "Then what do we do?" Mercer's gaze slid to the wheelchair in the corner, then to the side door, then to the vents. His mind moved like a map. "Back corridor," he rasped. "Supply hall, service routes, not the main hall." Kara nodded, mind racing through the layout. "There is a supply corridor behind the bays. It connects to sterile storage. There is a freight elevator at the end." Mercer's eyes flashed. "Good." Kara's voice trembled. "But they can lock elevators." Mercer's mouth tightened, then stairs. Another muffled shout came closer now. Kara heard Eli's voice, high with fear. Then silence. Kara's stomach dropped. She stepped toward the curtain and pulled it slightly aside, peering out. The hall was dim lit by red emergency lights. Shapes moved near the nurse's station. One of them wore a suit. The other wore tactical black under the suit jacket. Kara pulled the curtain back and pressed her forehead to it for a second, eyes closed. Mercer whispered, "Kara." Kara opened her eyes and looked at him. His face was pale. His lips had a gray tinge. The blood loss was winning its quiet war. Kara forced her voice steady. "I need to get you into the wheelchair." Mercer's eyes stayed on hers, hurts. Kara nodded. "I know." Mercer's fingers tightened on the sheet. "Do it anyway." Kara moved to the wheelchair and rolled it close. The wheels squeaked softly in the quiet. She braced herself, slid one arm behind Mercer's shoulders, the other under his arm. His body was heavy dead weight mixed with hard muscle. He grunted, pain tearing through him as she helped him sit up. Blood bloomed fresh at the edge of the bandage. Kara's stomach lurched. She pressed her hand there, instinctively applying pressure. Mercer's breathing went ragged. "Move." Kara gritted her teeth and shifted him toward the chair. His feet hit the floor, and his face went tight, a silent scream. He bit it back, jaw clenched. Kara's voice came out in a harsh whisper. "Hold on to me." Mercer's hand gripped her forearm like a clamp. Kara guided him down into the chair. He collapsed into it, head dipping forward. Kara grabbed a blanket and threw it over his shoulders, not for warmth, but to conceal, to make him look smaller, less like a target. She moved to the IV pole, unclipped it from the bed, and hooked it onto the side of the wheelchair as best she could. The red lights flickered again but stayed on. A voice cut through the hall outside, calm and controlled. "Harker, where is Nurse Monroe?" Kara froze. Mercer lifted his head slightly, eyes burning. "Go." Kara pushed the wheelchair toward the back door of the trauma bay, the one that led into storage and supply routes. Her hands tightened on the handles. She moved slowly, keeping the chair from squeaking too much, keeping her breathing quiet. As she reached the back door, she heard footsteps approaching the bay entrance. A shadow crossed the curtain. Kara pushed through the back door into the supply corridor. The door swung shut behind them with a soft, heavy click. The corridor beyond was dim shelves looming on both sides like silent walls, boxes stacked in neat lines, a narrow path cutting through. Kara pushed the wheelchair forward, wheels whispering over the floor. Behind her, through the closed door, voices sharpened. And then the door handle rattled. The handle rattled again, harder this time, metal clicking against metal in short, impatient bursts. Kara pushed the wheelchair deeper into the supply corridor, keeping it close to the shelves so the wheels would not squeal. Her palms were damp on the handles. The red emergency lights from the ER did not reach this far. Here the lighting was dimmer, a sickly yellow from backup fixtures that made everything look older and more tired than it was. Mercer sat slumped under the blanket, breathing shallowly. His eyes were open, tracking shadows, listening. He did not speak. He did not waste air. Behind them, the door shuddered once, then again, as if someone had put a shoulder into it. Kara's mind raced through the back hallways she had learned in orientation. Supply routes, linen returns, sterile storage, a freight elevator that creaked like an old ship, a stairwell that staff used when the main elevators were packed. She pushed faster. Boxes of gauze and syringes blurred past. The corridor narrowed, then opened into a junction where two paths split. Kara chose the left, the one that led toward the sterile storage and the freight access. She had taken this route a dozen times to restock carts, never once imagining she would be using it to run for her life. A muffled voice carried through the walls, low and close. Harker's voice, too calm. Kara's stomach tightened. He was not shouting. He did not need to. The overhead light in the corridor flickered, steadied, then flickered again. Kara pushed the wheelchair through another swinging door, the hinges groaning softly. They entered a narrower passage lined with tall shelves, plastic bins, wrapped trays, sealed packs. Everything in tidy rows meant to keep people alive. Kara's shoe slid on something wet. She caught herself and kept moving. The smell here was different, less antiseptic, more cardboard and rubber and dust. Mercer's voice came out as a whisper. "Stop." Kara halted so abruptly the chair bumped the shelf. "What?" Mercer's eyes angled toward the far end of the passage. "Listen." Kara held her breath. Footsteps, not from behind. From ahead, slow, measured, close enough to count. Kara's heart slammed once hard. She backed the wheelchair a few inches, the wheels squeaking despite her care. A figure stepped out from the shadows at the end of the aisle, a mop bucket in one hand, and in the other a pistol. Kara froze, her hands locked on the wheelchair handles. The figure lifted his head into the dim light. Walt Granger, the night janitor. He was in his 60s, shoulders stooped like he had spent a lifetime leaning into work. Gray hair like steel wool. Coveralls faded from hundreds of washes. He usually moved through the hospital like a ghost, earbuds and mop gliding eyes down. Now his eyes were up, sharp, calm, watching Kara like he had expected her. Kara's voice came out tight. "Walt!" Walt looked at her, then at Mercer beneath the blanket. His gaze did not widen. He did not look surprised. "Miss Monroe," he said. His voice was gravel steady. "I reckon you picked a bad night to work overtime." Kara swallowed. "Why do you have a gun?" Walt glanced down the corridor behind Kara, listening, then back. Took it off a suit by the vending machines. Buzz cut. Talked too much on his radio. Did not hear me coming. Kara's blood went cold. Walt's mouth twitched like that name meant nothing to him. "He is resting." Mercer shifted under the blanket. His eyes narrowed at Walt. "You military." Walt shrugged as if Mercer had asked what he wanted for breakfast. A long time ago. Mercer's gaze flicked to the gun, then to Walt's hands. "You know how to use it." Walt did not brag. "I know how to end problems." Kara's fingers tightened on the wheelchair. "They are searching for something." Walt looked at her pocket, then up to her face. "The drive." Kara felt a spike of panic. "How do you know?" Walt's eyes held hers, tired but clear. "I cleaned the bathrooms, Miss Monroe. I see everything. Ceiling tile was crooked. I fixed it." Kara's heart dropped into her stomach. "You moved it." Walt reached into his coveralls and pulled out the black drive. The silver manticore glinted faintly under the dim light. Kara stared. Walt. Walt pressed it into her palm like it was a set of keys. "You were climbing on toilets to hide it. Figured it mattered." Mercer's voice came out sharper. "Give it to me." Walt did not move. "No offense, son, but you look like you are about to pass out." Mercer's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. He did not have the strength for pride. Kara closed her fingers around the drive. It felt heavier now that someone else had held it. Heavier because she knew she was not alone anymore, and that made everything more real. Walt nodded toward the far end of the passage. They blocked the exits. 2 at the front, 1 at the ambulance bay. "Harker is at the nurse station messing with your computers." Kara's voice trembled. "How do you know that?" Walt's gaze drifted toward the ceiling as if listening to the building itself. "I have ears. Folks like me do not exist to people like him. Makes it easy." Mercer sucked in a breath through clenched teeth. "Roof." Kara blinked. "Roof." Mercer's eyes stayed steady. "I have a transponder in my boot, short range. If I get high enough, it might hit base." Kara's mind flashed to the boots Kroll had searched. "They checked your boots." Mercer gave a thin, bitter look. They did not know where to look. Walt's face did not change. "Elevators are locked. Stairs are the only way. But the stairwell is watched." Kara's stomach tightened. "Then we cannot use it." Mercer's eyes locked onto hers. "We use it anyway." Kara swallowed. The corridor around them felt like a throat closing. Walt lifted his chin toward a cleaning closet door nearby. "I got ammonia in there. Gallons." Kara stared at him. "Why are you telling me that?" Walt's eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you nurses know chemistry." Kara's mind snapped through training modules she had taken half asleep. "Do not mix bleach and ammonia. Toxic gas, lungs, eyes, panic." She looked at the shelves, then at the nearby supply cart stacked with cleaning products for the night crew. Kara's mouth went dry. "There's bleach in sterile supply." Mercer's gaze sharpened. He understood. A cloud. Walt nodded once. A distraction. Something to buy steps. Kara felt fear surge, then anger beneath it. Her hospital, her co-workers, her patients, her rules. None of it mattered to men like Harker. She looked at Mercer. He was pale, sweating, his lips turning gray at the edges, but his eyes were still lit with purpose. Kara nodded. "We do it carefully. Separate containers, minimal exposure." Walt's expression softened a fraction, respect or approval, hard to tell. "That is why you are the one holding the drive." They moved fast. Walt opened the cleaning closet and pulled out 2 plastic buckets. He poured ammonia into one, bleach into the other, keeping them separate. He snapped lids on both and handed one to Kara. Kara's hands shook as she took it. She forced them steady. Mercer reached weakly toward Walt's pistol, gun. Walt handed it over without drama. Mercer checked the chamber with a motion so smooth it looked like muscle memory. 1 in the pipe. He nodded once. Kara glanced down the corridor behind them. The door they had fled through was still closed, but she could hear distant voices now. A murmur. Footsteps. Searching. Closing in. Kara pushed the wheelchair forward, Walt walking beside her with the second bucket. Mercer sat upright as much as he could, gun low under the blanket. They reached the heavy fire door that led to the stairwell. Walt put his ear to it. Footsteps above. Descending. Walt's eyes met Kara's. "He is coming down." Mercer's voice was thin but controlled. "Open it." Walt gripped the handle. Kara raised the bucket in her hands, heart pounding so hard she thought it might shake the lid loose. Walt shoved the door open. Cold concrete air rushed out damp and stale. The stairwell was lit by emergency lights, red and dim. The sound of heavy boots echoed from above, rapid and confident. A silhouette appeared on the landing, moving down fast. Crawl. His suit jacket was open now, revealing tactical gear beneath. A compact, suppressed weapon in his hands. His eyes snapped to them. He raised the gun. Mercer fired first. The shot was deafening in the concrete stairwell. Kroll jerked the round, catching him in the shoulder. He stumbled back behind the wall weapon, clattering against the railing. Kara's whole body flinched at the sound, but she did not drop the bucket. Mercer fired again. A spark burst from the metal rail. Kroll swore, voice muffled, and his weapon flashed once. The suppressed shot sounded like a thick cough. The round hit the wall near Kara's shoulder, concrete dust bursting out. Walt's voice cut through. "Now." Kara and Walt moved as one. Walt popped the lid on his bucket. Kara popped hers. Walt poured the liquids, mixing in a sudden slosh. A white cloud erupted instantly, thick and aggressive, hissing as it spilled down the stairs like something alive. The smell hit Kara's nose, even through the air, sharp and wrong. Her eyes watered. "Cover," Mercer rasped. Kara yanked her scrub collar up over her mouth and nose. Walt did the same. The cloud rolled upward, filling the landing. Kroll coughed once, then again. Violent, choking, animal sounds. He gagged, retreated upward, boots scrambling. Kara's lungs burned just from the edge of it. She kept low, pushing the wheelchair into the stairwell wheels, bumping against the concrete lip at the threshold. "Move," Mercer said. Kara shoved forward. The wheelchair rattled as it hit the first step. Kara's stomach dropped. She could not carry him in the chair up multiple flights. Not like this. Not with the cloud behind them, not with bullets possibly waiting above. Mercer gritted his teeth and shifted his weight forward. "I have to walk." Kara looked at him. "You will fall." Mercer's jaw clenched. "If I fall, pick me up." Walt grabbed Mercer's arm. "Lean on me." Mercer pulled himself out of the chair. His feet hit the steps and his face tightened into a silent scream. Blood seeped through the bandage at his side, dark against the white gauze. Kara grabbed the wheelchair and shoved it aside so it would not block the stairs. Then she took the fire extinguisher off the wall, heavy in her hands, and climbed one step above them, leading. Walt and Mercer started upward, slow and painful. Behind them, the white cloud continued to hiss and spread. Kroll's coughing echoed, then faded upward. Kara's legs burned as she climbed. The emergency lights painted everything red and shadowed. The stairwell smelled like bleach and fear. They reached the second-floor landing. Kara pushed the door open a crack and listened. Silence. Then distant voices faint through the building. Kara closed the door again. "Keep going." Mercer's breathing was wet. Walt's grip was iron. They climbed. Third floor. Fourth. Each flight felt longer than the last. Kara's arms ached from holding the extinguisher. Her fingers cramped around the handle. She kept her eyes up, watching the next landing, expecting Harker to appear like a nightmare at the top. Mercer's voice came between breaths. "Drive!" Kara pressed her hand to her pocket where she had shoved it again, feeling the shape. "I have it," Walt muttered. "Good." They reached the final landing. The roof access door was a metal slab with a panic bar. Rain hammered it from the other side. The wind whistled through cracks in the frame. Kara put her hand on the bar. The door burst open from above. Harker stood in the doorway, framed by rain and night, his tie loosened, his hair finally damp. He held a pistol leveled at Kara's chest. His eyes flicked to Walt. The gun shifted. "Give me the drive," Harker said. His voice was still calm, but there was annoyance beneath it now, like a man who had been delayed. Or the old man dies first. Kara froze 5 steps below him. The extinguisher felt like a toy in her hands. Mercer was slumped against the wall gun in his hand hanging low. He could not raise it without risking Kara. Walt's shoulders tightened. He did not step back. He did not flinch. Kara's heart slammed. She forced her voice out. "You are not FBI." Harker smiled faintly. Smart girl, still not smart enough. Kara's fingers brushed the drive in her pocket. She could feel its hard edges, the manticore etched in silver. She thought of the toddler with the cough, the shipyard man with blood in his eyebrow, Eli fighting the printer, Reddick arguing with men who did not care about life. Harker's pistol remained steady. "Hand it over," he said. Kara reached into her pocket and pulled the drive out slowly. Harker's eyes locked on it. "Toss it," he commanded. Kara looked at him. "You are going to kill us anyway." Harker's smile deepened. "Probably." Mercer's head lifted a fraction. He made the tiniest motion with his chin. Down. Kara understood without understanding how. She dropped to her knees instead of tossing the drive. The gun fired. The shot cracked the air above her head so close she felt the heat of it pass. At the same instant, Mercer raised his pistol and fired from the hip, the movement tearing pain across his face. The bullet hit Harker in the leg. Harker buckled with a sharp curse but did not drop his weapon. He raised it again, aiming down at Kara on the stairs. A metallic sound rang out, a heavy clang like a pipe striking bone. Harker's eyes widened. His body pitched forward. He tumbled down the stairs and slammed onto the landing at Kara's feet, unconscious, rainwater dripping off his suit. Kara stared stunned. Then she looked up. Eli Brooks stood in the doorway to the roof, soaked through shivering, holding a massive pipe wrench in both hands, like it was the only thing keeping him standing. His eyes were huge. His breathing came in panicked bursts. "I heard shouting," Eli stammered. "I was up here for a smoke break. I saw him, and I just swung." Kara's mouth opened, no words coming at first. Walt moved down 2 steps and checked Harker's pulse with 2 fingers. "He is breathing." Eli's face crumpled. "I did not kill him." "Not yet," Walt said, and there was no humor in it. Mercer coughed, hard blood flecking his lip. "Tie him." Kara looked at Harker at the suit at the tie loosened around his collar. Walt's hands were already moving. He yanked the tie free, looped it around Harker's wrists, and cinched it tight. He bound Harker to the railing knots, clean and practical. Mercer slid down the wall, strength fading, boot, heel. Kara scrambled to him, hands shaking. "What?" Mercer's eyes fluttered. "Transponder. Twist." Kara dropped to her knees and grabbed Mercer's boot. Her fingers found a small seam at the heel. She twisted hard. A tiny red light blinked on. Mercer exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. "Signal is out." Kara's chest rose and fell too fast. The stairwell felt suddenly too small, too exposed. Then Harker's radio crackled. A voice came through, distorted by static but clear enough to freeze Kara's blood. "Harker, this is command. Cleanup team ETA 2 minutes. Scrub protocol, no survivors." Kara's eyes snapped to Mercer. Mercer's face went hard with grim recognition. "That is not backup." Walt's jaw tightened. "They are sending killers." Eli's voice cracked. "No survivors." Rain hammered the roof door above them. Wind moaned through the opening. Kara looked at her small crew. A rookie nurse, a dying operator, an old janitor with calm hands, a terrified desk clerk holding a pipe wrench like a lifeline. Kara's fear shifted into something else, a clear, hot anger. "We are not waiting here," she said, voice shaking but firm. Mercer's eyes met hers, respect flickering through the haze of pain. Roof. Cover. Kara pushed the roof door open, and the storm hit her like a wall. The rooftop was a wide stretch of gravel and concrete slick with rain. Industrial air conditioning units squatted in rows like steel animals. The helipad lay empty, a black circle with a white H shining under the deluge. The city beyond was blurred lights smeared by rain, the port cranes barely visible. Kara moved low instincts, screaming. She could feel the wind tugging at her scrubs. Walt and Eli hauled Mercer up behind her. Mercer stumbling, leaning heavily every step, leaving a dark smear on the wet concrete. Behind the chillers, Walt shouted over the wind. "Steel will stop bullets." They half ran, half slid across the roof toward the row of massive units. Kara's shoe slipped on the gravel and she caught herself with a hand skin scraping against wet stone. Pain flashed. She ignored it. They dove behind the nearest unit just as a new sound rose from the darkness. Not a siren. Not a medevac. A low, mechanical growl that vibrated in Kara's teeth. A helicopter lifted up from the edge of the building like a dark shape rising out of the storm. Matte black. No markings, no lights. A shadow with a purpose. It hovered, then angled, circling the downdraft, spraying rain sideways in sheets. Kara pressed her back against the steel housing, heart slamming. Mercer's voice was a rasp. "They are not landing." The helicopter banked, and the high-pitched whine of a weapon spinning up cut through the storm. Kara's stomach dropped, minigun. The first burst tore through the roof edge, chewing concrete, sending chunks of stone and metal flying. The stairwell door they had come through shuddered and cracked. Shrapnel scattered across the roof like angry hail. Eli screamed and ducked lower, covering his head. Kara forced her eyes open. The helicopter was strafing. It was not trying to take them alive, it was trying to erase them. Mercer tried to lift his pistol. His hand shook too hard. He lowered it again, teeth bared with frustration and pain. "I cannot hit a pilot," he rasped. "Not like this." Walt's eyes tracked the helicopter's path. He pulled a coil of copper wire from his tool belt, something Kara had never noticed before. Kara stared. "You carry that?" Walt did not look away from the aircraft. Old habits. The helicopter came around again, nose-dipping. The minigun whined. Walt's voice cut through the storm. "Miss Monroe, hospital units, high-voltage circuits." Kara blinked, mind-catching. 480 lines, yes. Walt nodded toward the tops of the chillers where heavy fan housing sat. "If we snag something, blind something, break something." Kara's eyes flicked across the roof, searching. Her brain did what it always did in emergencies. Inventory, options, what can I use? Her gaze landed on a cluster of bright green pipes running along the parapet wall marked with industrial labels. The central oxygen supply. She had seen maintenance working on it once and had asked what it was because she was new and curious. There was a relief valve near the helipad. Red wheel handle. Kara's pulse slammed. "Oxygen line," she shouted over the wind. "There is a relief valve right by the pad." Eli lifted his head, rain streaming down his face. "Oxygen does not burn." Kara's voice came out sharp. "It accelerates. It makes fire hotter." Mercer's eyes focused, understanding sliding into place. "Exhaust." Kara nodded. "The engine intake needs a fuel-air ratio. Flood it with oxygen and it can surge." Mercer's mouth curved into a savage half-smile, or stall. Walt's eyes stayed on the helicopter. "We need it close to the pad." Eli's hands shook around the pipe wrench. "How?" Walt reached into his pocket and pulled out a road flare. The bright red cylinder looked absurd in his hand, like a 4th of July prop in a war zone. Eli stared. "You carry that too." Walt's mouth twitched. "I check vents. Roof gets dark." He struck it. The flare hissed to life, throwing harsh red light into the rain smoke twisting sideways in the wind. Kara's eyes squinted against the brightness. Walt tossed the flare into the open away from their cover toward the helipad. The helicopter's nose shifted, tracking the bright red point like a predator drawn to movement. The minigun whined again, and bullets ripped into the gravel near the flare sparks and debris flying. Mercer coughed, then forced his voice out. "Now!" Kara crawled along the steel housing, keeping low. Rain soaked her hair, ran down her neck. She reached the green pipe cluster and gripped the red wheel handle. The metal was cold and slick. She tried to turn it. It did not budge. Kara gritted her teeth and used both hands, bracing her foot against the concrete. The valve groaned, then shifted. A thin hiss began sharp and high. The oxygen plume started as an invisible force. Then the sound grew louder, a violent rushing that rose into the storm like a scream. Kara ducked, shielding her face. The helicopter dipped lower, drawn toward the flare, and the pad hovering into the path of the oxygen stream. Mercer's voice ragged behind her. "Shoot it!" Kara looked back. Mercer had his pistol up, braced against the steel unit with shaking hands. His face was pale as paper. Sweat ran down his temple. He took a breath, held it, and fired at the valve assembly to rupture it wider. The first shot sparked off metal. Mercer cursed under his breath, steadied, fired again. The valve housing exploded with a sharp crack, metal fragments spinning away. The oxygen plume turned ferocious, a roaring jet blasting upward into the helicopter's hover path. The aircraft hit the stream. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the engine note changed. It rose in pitch, an ugly, strained whine that cut through the storm like a scream. Flames shot from the exhaust, white-hot, far longer than they should have been. The rotor speed spiked, then wobbled. The helicopter lurched sideways. Its tail swung too close to the parapet wall. The tail rotor clipped concrete with a crunch. The aircraft spun, lost lift, and slammed down onto the helipad with the brutal force of a car crash. The rotors shattered fragments whipping across the roof. Kara pressed herself flat behind the pipe cluster, hands over her head. The fuselage groaned and tipped, sliding across the slick pad toward the roof edge. It teetered, then caught on safety netting hanging at an angle. The storm swallowed the noise for a second. Silence hit hard. Eli's voice shook. Did we do it?" Mercer's voice was barely there. "Stay down." The side door of the wrecked helicopter kicked open. A man in black tactical gear crawled out, dazed, blood on his forehead. He still had a carbine in his hands. He lifted his head and saw them. He raised the weapon. Mercer tried to lift his pistol again. His arm failed. The gun slipped from his fingers and clattered against the roof. Mercer's eyes locked on Kara. Kara's legs did not move. Her body went cold and still, like her brain had cut power to preserve itself. The man aimed at her. Then a red dot appeared on his chest. Then another on his shoulder. Then a dozen red dots danced across his vest and helmet, steady and precise. Kara's breath caught. A voice boomed from above through a loudspeaker, deep and amplified, slicing through the rain. "United States Navy. Drop the weapon. Drop it now." Kara looked up. Two large helicopters hovered high above the roofline, floodlights flipping on, bathing the rooftop in blinding white. The rain turned into silver needles in the light. The aircraft were bigger than the matte black one, solid and purposeful markings visible even through the storm. The tactical man hesitated. A single shot cracked, sharp and clean. The man jerked as the round hit his shoulder, not killing, forcing compliance. He dropped the carbine and collapsed. Ropes fell from the big helicopters. Operators fast roped down with fluid precision, dark figures moving like water across the roof. They spread out weapons, trained voices loud and controlled. "Hands. Let me see hands." Clara raised her hands, high fingers spread. Walt did the same. Eli dropped the pipe wrench with a clatter and lifted his hands, shaking. One operator moved toward Mercer. Mercer was slumped against the steel unit, eyes half closed, breathing thin. "Officer down," Kara shouted, voice breaking. "He is a SEAL. Commander Mercer. He needs help." The operator reached Mercer and checked him quickly, then tapped his headset. "Bravo 1 to command. Package is critical. Repeat, package is critical. Need a medic now." The operator turned his head toward Kara. Night vision goggles covered his eyes, but his voice was human. "You the nurse?" Kara nodded, rain and tears mixing. "Yes." He gripped her shoulder once firm. "Good work." Kara's body shook as adrenaline drained out of her in a sudden rush. Her knees threatened to buckle. Another operator moved to Harker's bound body near the roof door, checking him, securing him with zip ties. Walt's voice came out low to Kara. "Told you badges are props." Kara swallowed hard. "Reddick, Tessa, the patients." The operator's voice cut through. "We have teams inside." Kara clung to those words like a lifeline, even though she could not see anything below. A medic dropped onto the roof and went straight to Mercer, hands moving fast, efficient, sure. Oxygen mask, pressure dressing, quick assessment. The medic called numbers into a mic. Mercer's eyes fluttered open for a fraction of a second. He found Kara with a weak focus. His lips moved. Kara leaned close. His voice was barely a whisper under the storm. Drive. Kara's fingers closed around the drive in her pocket, checking without looking. I have it. Mercer's eyelids lowered, relief crossing his face like a shadow passing. The medic lifted him onto a stretcher with help from 2 operators. Mercer's body looked too heavy, too still for someone who had been fighting like a machine minutes ago. Kara watched them carry him toward the edge where the big helicopter hovered, rope lines ready. Walt stepped closer to her, staying near but not touching. You did good. Kara could not answer. She did not trust her voice. Eli stood with his hand still raised, eyes locked on the floodlights as if the brightness might burn him. His mouth moved. Are we under arrest? An operator glanced at him. You are being secured. Sit down and breathe. Eli obeyed, collapsing onto the wet gravel. Kara's gaze went to the broken oxygen line still hissing, spewing a pale mist into the rain. Maintenance alarms somewhere below would be screaming. The hospital roof smelled sharp metallic, alive. She felt the weight of the night pressing down. The sense that the building would never feel the same again. A final operator approached Kara, voice firm. You are coming with us. Kara nodded slowly. Hands still raised, then lowered them when he motioned. She touched the drive in her pocket one more time, confirming it was real, confirming she had not imagined any of it. As they guided her toward the helicopter, Kara glanced back once. The helipad was wrecked. The black helicopter lay tilted, broken like a dead insect. Harker was bound at the roof door, his suit soaked, now his face slack. Walt stood straight in the rain, older than he looked an hour ago, and somehow steadier. Eli sat on the gravel, staring at his own hands like they belonged to someone else. And Mercer was being lifted into the sky, disappearing into the bright mouth of the Navy aircraft, swallowed by medics and operators and the promise of a place where badges meant something again. Kara climbed into the helicopter's open bay, the wind tugging at her hair and scrubs, and sat where they pointed. A blanket was thrown over her shoulders. It smelled like wool and aircraft oil. The doors began to close. The storm noise shifted, muffled, as if someone had put the world behind glass. Kara stared at her hands in her lap. They were scraped, streaked with grime, shaking. She pressed her palm to her pocket and felt the hard edge of the drive one more time. Outside, the floodlights cut through the rain, and the rotor wash turned the roof into a blur of water and debris as Tacoma fell away beneath them. The helicopter's bay vibrated with rotor noise and wet cold. Kara sat on the bench seat with a wool blanket pulled around her shoulders, watching rain streak sideways through the open gaps before the crew chief sealed them tight. The air smelled like fuel and metal, and something clean underneath it, a kind of order that did not exist in an ER. Across from her, Walt held his hands on his knees, posture, steady eyes forward. Eli sat beside him with his shoulders curled in, still wearing the stunned expression of someone who had been forced into a story he did not audition for. Kara tried her phone again out of habit. Still nothing. The screen felt like a dead weight in her palm. She slid it back into her pocket and pressed her fingers against the hard shape of the drive, checking that it was still there, checking that the night had not been a fever dream. A medic knelt near Mercer on the deck. Mercer was strapped down, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. His face had gone slack with exhaustion, the fight finally leaving his body. The medic spoke into a headset in short-clipped phrases, calling vitals, calling fluid volumes, calling coordinates. Kara caught only fragments over the roar. Walt leaned slightly toward her, voice low. You got people in that hospital. Kara nodded once. Her throat was tight. Dr. Reddick, Tessa, other patients. Walt did not offer comfort. He offered reality. Navy came fast. That means they were listening. Kara stared at the metal floor. Or they were waiting. Walt's gaze stayed forward. Either way, we are not on that roof anymore. Kara's fingers clenched inside the blanket. The words did not calm her, but they anchored her. She watched the medic adjust Mercer's IV and thought of Reddick's hand steady in the bright surgical light. She pictured Tessa's face when she realized something was wrong. She tried not to picture silenced shots echoing through the halls. The helicopter banked, and Tacoma's lights slid away beneath them, smeared by rain into long, trembling lines. Kara's stomach rolled with the movement, and she swallowed hard. After what felt like both minutes and hours, the aircraft descended. The rotor noise changed pitch deeper, heavier. The door opened and colder air rushed in. Kara saw a lit landing pad and dark figures moving with purpose, not panic. She felt hands guide her down, gloved and firm, respectful, but unyielding. They moved her into a building through a side entrance. The hallway smelled of disinfectant too, but not the same as her hospital. This disinfectant sat on top of new paint and sealed doors. Sound did not travel here. Even their footsteps felt muted. Kara was led into a small room with pale walls and a table bolted to the floor. Walt and Eli were brought in with her. A Marine guard stood by the door, still as a statue. Another guard remained outside, visible through a narrow window. Kara sat and forced her hands to stop shaking. She realized only then that her knee was bleeding through a scrape and her palms had small cuts from the gravel roof. She did not feel them. Her body was still running on borrowed adrenaline. The door opened. A woman walked in wearing a dark suit that fit like armor. Her hair was pulled back, her expression composed. She carried a folder and a calm that made Kara straighten without knowing why. "I am Special Agent Mira Sato," the woman said. "Naval Criminal Investigative Service." Kara's eyes flicked to the badge at her belt. It looked real. That did not mean anything anymore. Behind Sato came a man in dress whites. He moved with measured authority, the kind that made rooms quiet before he spoke. His face was lined not with age so much as weight. When he looked at Kara, his eyes did not skim. They landed. "Rear Admiral Bennett Knox," he said. "Thank you for coming with us." Eli let out a small sound. "We did not exactly have a choice." Sato's gaze slid to him. "You are correct." The Admiral's tone stayed even. "Commander Mercer is in surgery." Kara's lungs locked, then released in a shaky breath. "He is alive." "For now," Knox said. He did not soften the truth. "The surgeons say he is stubborn. That is an advantage tonight." Kara pressed her hands flat against the table to keep them steady. "My co-workers." Sato flipped open the folder, eyes scanning. "Dr. Reddick and Nurse Vaughn are alive. Injured, but alive. 2 civilians were treated for minor injuries during evacuation. The emergency department was secured." Kara's eyes burned with sudden tears. She blinked them away hard. Walt's shoulders eased a fraction, and Eli exhaled like he had been holding his breath since the roof. Sato continued, voice controlled. "We have a man matching the description of Agent Harker in custody. Another suspect was found unconscious in the hospital corridor. He is being transported under guard." Kara's mouth went dry, crawl. Sato's eyes did not react. "We are still identifying him." The Admiral leaned forward, folding his hands. "Manticore Strategic has already begun distributing a narrative. They are claiming Commander Mercer went rogue and stole classified material." Kara felt heat rise in her chest. "That is a lie?" "Yes," Knox said. "And lies spread faster than facts when money pays for the wind." Sato slid a laptop onto the table and opened it, then left it closed. She looked at Kara with a gaze that was not unkind but did not invite arguments. "We understand you may have recovered an item from Commander Mercer." Kara did not move. Walt's eyes flicked to Kara, then back to the table. He did not speak. Eli looked between them, confusion and fear colliding. What item? Kara kept her gaze on Sato. "He told me not to give it to badges." Sato held Kara's eyes. That was wise. Kara's fingers tightened. "How do I know you are not them?" The Marine guard by the door shifted slightly. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Eli went still. Knox lifted one hand, a subtle signal. The guard relaxed back into stillness. "You do not," Knox said. "Not yet." Kara stared at him. The honesty in his answer hit harder than reassurance would have. Knox continued, voice low, "I cannot ask you to trust me because of rank. I can only offer you a chance to verify." He reached into the pocket of his uniform and placed a heavy coin on the table. It made a solid sound, not flashy, just weight. Kara looked down. The coin's design was simple, worn at the edges. A trident on one side. On the other, a set of initials and a date too small to read from where she sat. Knox's voice softened, but only slightly. "That coin belonged to my commanding officer when I was a younger man. I carried it on my first deployment. I gave it to Mercer when he earned his place." Kara looked up. "You know him." "I sent him," Knox said. "I knew the risk. I knew the enemy. I did not know he would bleed on a hospital table." Sato opened the folder again. "We also have the transponder signal log. We have the rooftop audio captured by our aircraft. We have body-worn footage from the operators who recovered you." Kara's throat tightened. "That does not answer the question." Knox nodded once, no. Kara reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out the drive. The black matte casing looked small and ordinary against the gray table. The silver manticore caught the fluorescent light. Sato's gaze locked on it. She did not reach. Kara placed it on the table but kept her hand on top palm covering the symbol like she could pin the knight down. "If I give you this, Kara said you can make it disappear." Sato's voice was quiet. "Yes." Kara's eyes widened. She had expected denial. Sato continued. "And if you refuse, Manticore will keep coming. They already know your name. They already know your face. They know where you work. They know where your car is parked." Eli made a choked sound. Walt's jaw tightened. Kara's fingers pressed harder on the drive. "So what am I supposed to do?" Knox looked at her with something like respect. "You already did it." Kara swallowed. "I want one thing." Sato's brows lifted slightly. "Name it." Kara's voice shook but did not break. "I want to be in the room when you open it." Sato held her gaze, then nodded once, agreed. Kara removed her hand. Sato reached forward and took the drive with gloved fingers, not out of fear of germs, but out of discipline. She plugged it into the laptop and opened the lid. The screen glowed blue, then populated with folders and file names. Sato clicked once. A video window appeared. The footage was grainy shot from a distance, but the shapes were unmistakable. A hangar, men in uniforms, men in suits, a case exchanged, a handshake held too long, a foreign operative's face blurred by rain on a camera lens. The audio crackled, but Kara could make out voices controlled and casual discussing numbers that sounded like budgets and schedules. The kind of conversation that belonged in meetings, not in shadows. Knox's face changed. Not shock, not surprise. A cold tightening as if something inside him had finally snapped into place. Sato paused the video and clicked through more files. Documents, diagrams, a list of names. Some were redacted, some were not. Eli leaned forward, then jerked back, realizing he should not be seeing any of it. "That is real." Walt did not speak. His eyes stayed on the screen the way a soldier watches confirmation arrive. Kara felt sick, not from gore, from the calmness of betrayal, from the way it looked like any other business transaction. Knox stared at the paused frame and spoke quietly, the words heavy. "This is treason." Sato closed the laptop halfway, not hiding it from Kara but securing it. "We will move on arrests immediately." Knox's gaze shifted to Kara, then to Walt and Eli. "You three are going to be offered protection, temporary relocation, confidentiality agreements, medical and psychological support." Eli's voice trembled. "What if we say no?" Knox's expression did not change. "Then you will still receive protection. You will just make our job harder." Kara's fingers traced the scrape on her palm absent-mindedly. "My hospital is going to hear a story." Sato nodded. "They will hear that an armed suspect attempted to retrieve stolen property. They will hear that security contained the situation. They will not hear your names." Kara looked at Knox. "What about Dr. Reddick? Tessa?" Knox spoke without hesitation. They will be commended privately. They will be compensated. They will be monitored for retaliation. You have my word. Kara held his gaze, searching for something she could use. She did not find warmth. She did find steadiness. Sato closed the laptop fully and slid it into her bag. She stood. We will take statements. Then you will rest. Kara stood 2 shoulders stiff. Can I see him? Knox nodded. When he is stable enough, not tonight. Kara's jaw tightened. She nodded once. A medic entered and cleaned Kara's knee, bandaged it quickly. Kara barely felt it. Her mind kept looping back to the sound of Harker's voice in her hallway. The way he said her name like it belonged to him. Later, in a small room with a cot and a blanket, Kara lay awake listening to silence. No beeping monitors. No call lights. No voices through curtains. Just the faint hum of ventilation. She pressed her hand to her chest and tried to slow her breathing. In the morning, she was escorted to a secure transport that returned her to a different kind of building, a place where paperwork had teeth. She gave her statement twice. She signed forms she did not fully understand. Walt and Eli did the same. They were fed. They were watched. They were not treated like criminals, but they were not treated like free people either. Kara accepted that. Freedom felt like a strange thing after a night where a badge could be a weapon. Weeks passed. The official news story was brief. An armed incident, a suspect, a controlled situation. No mention of contractors. No mention of a helicopter. No mention of an oxygen plume that had screamed into the storm. Rainier Harbor Medical Center repaired the roof and replaced the door. The oxygen line was fixed. A new security camera system went up. Kara was given administrative leave. The letter used careful language as if anything too direct could attract attention. Kara found herself waking at night to the phantom whine of a minigun in her head. She would sit up in bed with her heart racing and stare at the ceiling until dawn. She attended counseling sessions offered in quiet offices with no windows. She told the story in pieces because saying it all at once made her shake too hard. And then one afternoon she received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple letter on thick paper and an admissions packet. University of Washington School of Medicine. Kara read it 3 times before it felt real. She laughed once, sharp and disbelieving, then pressed the paper to her forehead as if it could cool the heat behind her eyes. 6 months after the storm, Tacoma looked different. Not safer, not kinder, just ordinary again in the way cities always become after violence. The waterfront smelled like salt and coffee. Tourists walked with umbrellas and pretended the rain was charming. Kara sat at a small outdoor table near the water-iced coffee, sweating on the wood. She wore jeans and a jacket, no badge, no stethoscope. Her hands still bore faint marks from that night, thin, pale lines where gravel and metal had bitten her. A shadow fell across her table. Kara looked up. A man stood there leaning on a cane. Jeans, gray shirt hair, trimmed short. His face was fuller skin, healthier, but his eyes were the same sharp blue that had looked into her and demanded a choice. Cole Mercer. Kara stood so fast her chair scraped. "You are alive." Mercer's mouth curved into a small smile. "Hard to kill." Kara stared at him, throat tight. "You should not be walking." "I am not walking far," he said, nodding at the chair opposite. "May I?" Kara sat slowly still, watching him like he might vanish. Mercer lowered himself into the chair with controlled care. The cane rested against his knee. His shoulder moved a fraction too stiffly. He was healing, not healed. Kara swallowed. "Dr. Reddick and Tessa." Mercer nodded. "Alive, Reddick is angry. Vaughn is angry. They are both stubborn. That is why they survived." Kara let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Walt." Mercer's eyes softened. "Walt is being paid well to guard a maritime museum. Quiet job. He complains about tourists. He likes it." Kara's mouth twitched. "Eli." Mercer's grin widened. "Joined the Navy. He says if he can swing a pipe wrench, he can do anything. He is very loud about it." Kara laughed a real sound that surprised her. The laugh loosened something in her chest that had been clenched for months. Mercer watched her for a moment, then reached into his pocket and set a small velvet box on the table. Kara's breath caught. "What is that?" "No ceremony," Mercer said. "Admiral Knox wanted one. I told him you would hate it. He told me to deliver this instead." Kara stared at the box without touching it. "I did not do it for a medal." Mercer's voice dropped quiet and serious. "I know." Kara opened the box. A civilian service medal lay inside, simple and heavy, the kind that carried weight without glitter. Kara's fingers hovered, then touched it lightly. Mercer leaned forward a fraction. "You kept me alive," he said. "But that is not the part I carry. You kept my name from being turned into a lie." Kara looked up at him. "I was scared." Mercer nodded once. "So was I." Kara's throat tightened. "I did not know what I was doing." Mercer's gaze held hers. "You did." Kara closed the box gently and set it down. She stared out at the water, gray under the clouds, waves rolling in steady lines. After a moment she asked, "Are they gone?" Mercer's jaw tightened slightly. "Some are in custody, some are being hunted. Manticore is bleeding. But things like that do not die clean." Kara nodded. She did not need a promise, she needed truth. Mercer's eyes flicked to her hands. "You still work at the hospital." Kara shook her head. "I left." Mercer studied her face. "You miss it." Kara hesitated, then nodded. "I miss saving people. I do not miss feeling trapped." Mercer's mouth softened. "You got accepted." Kara looked at him surprised. "How do you know?" Mercer's smile returned. "Knox talks. Sato talks less, but she does not hide good news." Kara's fingers traced the edge of the iced coffee cup. "I start soon." Mercer nodded. "Good." They sat in the sound of rain and the distant gulls and the low city hum. Kara looked at him again. "Why did you give it to me?" Mercer's eyes stayed on hers. "Because you looked at me like I was a person." "Not a problem." Kara's throat tightened. Mercer leaned back slightly, hand resting on the cane. "And because the people who came for me were used to fear. You were afraid, but you did not hand them what they wanted." Kara stared at the box. Her fingers curled around her own hands, keeping them still. After a long, quiet moment, she said, "I still hear the radio." Mercer nodded, no surprise in his expression. "It gets quieter." Kara looked out at the water again. Mercer spoke softly, as if choosing his words carefully. "If you ever need a door opened, you call. You have people now." Kara turned back to him. "People." Mercer nodded once. "People." Kara did not smile. Not yet. But her shoulders eased just a fraction. The rain kept falling steady and ordinary, and for the first time in a long time, Kara did not feel like the night was still chasing her down a hallway.